Coming up on the Men at the Movies podcast, I talk with Britt and Sarah about Ladyhawke. This movie reveals the failure of false religion in contrast to the conversational relationship Mouse has with God. And like Isabeau and Navarre, we long for intimacy, but constantly fail. We need a community to succeed and help us to bridge the gap. Join us as we discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being. Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name's Paul McDonald, and joining me here on this Monday evening is Britt and Sarah. Hey guys, how you doing tonight?
Yo, what's up, my friend?
Doing well, man. Chilling.
No big intro from Sarah this time when we did Goonies and the hey you guys.
Well, there really wasn't anything like that in Ladyhawke. I mean,
Good point.
Yeah, I tried to. I'm sorry, man. I'm still sick. Okay. Break.
Sarah is podcasting under the influence. She's taking her cold medicine, but she's toughing it out because that's her level of professional dedication and her love of this movie.
That's right.
Ladyhawke, which came out in 1985. It's got the big ones are Matthew Broderick and Michelle Pfeiffer and the guy.
Well, actually, Matthew Broderick and Michelle Pfeiffer were not big when this movie came out.
No, they weren't nothing back then.
Well, Broderick had just done War Games.
Oh, yeah.
And Ferris Bueller didn't come out till 1986. So Ferris Bueller was really the big one that made him a household name.
Michelle Pfeiffer had done Grease 2, and she was fresh off Scarface, but she was perfect in this role. I mean, she is ethereal. Like, every time she's on screen, she just steals it from everybody else. I mean, it's
like looking at the face of love.
Yeah, and she's the first reveal, when they first reveal her face, it's perfect. She was perfect for this role.
I saw an interview with Matthew Broderick years ago, and they were talking about this movie, or maybe just about Michelle Pfeiffer or something. And he said, "Yeah, we were making this movie, and it was the first cast party where we were all going to meet." And he said, "I'd heard about this beautiful woman that was going to be in the movie." And he said, she was like on the balcony and I was walking up to the house where the cast party was. He said, I literally thought that's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life. She definitely steals that part of the show in that respect. But she was, she's a quality actress though, too. I mean, she does such a great job. I think Scarface was her first role maybe. And then it was right around the same time Grease 2 came out, which I will forever know, the song Cool Rider because of that scene. But Grease 2 was not a great movie, but I did love it at the time because I was a huge Grease fan.
How dare you?
Jeez. Okay. I'm glad you.
Hey man, I have no
take. Shame. Grease 2, not a great movie.
No, it's not.
Yeah, I know she was in. I think she was in Hollywood Nights.
She was. Good call. 1980.
Oh, I don't even know.
You know where I got that one off of? The podcast that I used to love, 80s All Over, which no longer exists. It's very sad, but it was a fantastic podcast where they went through 80s movies 1 month at a time.
But Rutger Hauer wasn't the original choice. It was Kurt Russell was the original choice. And he read the script and thought it was going to stink. So he was like, I don't want to do a fantasy movie. And he rejected it. So like at the last minute, they had to get somebody. And I think Rutger Hauer is perfect. I mean,
oh yeah, no, I think he's terrific. and stuff. I read somewhere they wanted Sean Connery, which I think would have been a terrible mistake. I mean, he could be like Michelle Pfeiffer's grandfather.
Yeah, no, it would have been.
He wasn't that old in 85, though.
I know, but there was still some
he
years
was old
there,
enough.
though. I mean,
he was old enough. But Rutger Hauer, I mean, he had just come off of Blade Runner, and one of my favorite movies of that era, one of my favorite horror movies, The Hitcher, if you've never seen, is like a psychological thriller. You'd recognize who the two young people were in it, but Rutger Hauer plays kind of this really weird, dark character, but like he does that stoic look so well. And I think his acting is great. And of course, Broderick was perfect.
No, I love Matthew Broderick. I read a couple of articles where people thought that Matthew Broderick was like a poor choice as Philippe because he came across as like too 80s, and that like he was like Ferris Bueller before Ferris Bueller came out. I thought, no, I totally disagree. I thought he was fantastic as Philippe. Like just that right little bit of humor in there. Yeah. It was great.
Well, I mean, it was at times it was a little too 80s teen, but they got away with it. Like in Ferris Bueller, they took advantage of his charm by having him talk to the camera, like breaking the fourth wall. In this movie, he breaks the fourth wall by talking to God. Like he's literally like, it's the same sort of writing element to it where he's just talking to God, but it's still the same sort of, writing element to it where he's narrating, giving us information, but it's in a very funny way with him and God, No, I love Matthew Broderick, and the other guys I don't know as well. The one, it does have Doc Ock in it, Alfred Molina, and
this is back when he was in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Just a few years after
he was in so many bit parts back in the 80s.
Oh, I know, totally.
And like you see him every now and then in a movie, you're like, oh my gosh,
he's such a fantastic character actor. I had no idea he was British until I saw him in a documentary about Raiders of the Lost Ark, and he's talking in this British accent. And I was like, what?
Yeah. He's been in a ton of stuff. But, the guy who plays the bishop does a really good job. The guy who plays, Imperious.
Also in War Games.
That's right. He was in War Games.
John Wood.
Good call.
Yeah.
Anyway, the cast is great. And I think the writing, we'll get into the writing, and I think all the different layers that are in it. So many archetypal sort of characters that they just make work. Like for its time, it was, that medieval fantasy hadn't been quite overdone yet, and really you can really get away with it with Lord of the Rings nowadays because it's Lord of the Rings. But, it's that sort of medieval fantasy has been done so much, but they made it work.
Yeah, they didn't take it into the bizarre like a lot of the movies around that period did.
Oh,
Like
Krull was awful.
It really was bad.
How dare you? I like Krull.
No, you don't.
Hey, the glaive, stuff.
We used to have the board game, Krull, the board game.
Oh my God.
That's amazing.
Do I remember the movie? No, not at all. Except it's got the glaive. I don't.
The glaive. Everybody remembers the glaive. Yeah. No. I feel like they remained very just like simplistic in the storytelling, and they didn't, like I said, go overboard with a lot of magic or tons of characters or really complicated set pieces or monsters or anything like that. I thought it was extremely well done. Like Donner's motto for a lot of his other movies is verisimilitude. I'm going to say this wrong. Verisimilitude? I think that's as close as I'm going to get to it. Basically, it's truth in making the viewer see the movie as totally believable, even when it's, pure fiction. So that was his big catchphrase when he was filming Superman, like made its way onto the poster. You'll believe a man can fly. You know, it's like he wants people to believe what they're seeing.
That'd be a hard right turn if we pitched Ladyhawke and then talked about Superman.
It would be.
Oh, don't get me started, man. That's like a whole other podcast. I'd go on for hours. It's like...
So we've killed about 10 minutes now talking the trivia stuff. And so what I'd like to do is play the one clip I have in the bank. I'm going to shoot the bullet early tonight for the 5 people that are still listening. And so the framework for this, because this really is the story. It's Imperius, the sort of the renegade, reject, forlorn, forgotten the priest, and his name's Imperius, and he's basically telling Philippe what happened. Of course, Isabeau, Michelle Pfeiffer's character, and Navarre fall in love, but the bishop also has designs, has problems, has issues, and so instead of synopsizing the movie, I'm just going to sort of set the framework here with this clip as Imperius is telling Philippe about their backstory, and it's coming into the story where he says, "Oh, the bishop was in love with her too," because that's when the love story goes awry, because you've in the sort of the original plan, you've got Isabeau and Navarre. They fall in love. He's the captain of the guard. She's the face of love. And everything goes great until the bishop not only falls in love with her, but realizes that they are in love with each other.
Even His Grace, the bishop, could think of nothing else.
The bishop loved her?
As near as that evil man could come to it. His passion was a sort of madness. He was a man possessed. But Isabeau sensed his wickedness, and she shrank from him. She sent back all his letters unopened, his poems unread. Her heart was already lost, you see, to the captain of the guard.
Etienne Navarre.
The bishop knew nothing of their love, but every day saw it grow stronger and deeper and richer. Until? They were betrayed. They shared the same confessor. A weak and foolish priest. And one day, in a drunken confession to his superior, he committed a mortal sin. He revealed the lover's secret vows to the bishop. The old fool didn't realize what he had done at first, nor the terrible revenge the bishop would take. His Grace seemed to go mad. He lost both his sanctity and his reason. He swore that if he could not have her, no man would. So Navarre and Isabeau fled from Aquila. But the bishop followed, never more than an hour behind and more persistent than a hound. An evil man, a powerful man, hated and feared, rejected even by Rome herself. He called upon the powers of darkness for the means to damn the lovers. In his fury and frustration, he struck a dreadful bargain with the evil one. The dark powers of hell spat up a terrible curse, and you have seen it working. By day, Isabeau is the beautiful bird you brought to me. And by night, as you have already guessed, the voice of the wolf that we hear is the cry of Navarre. Poor dumb creatures with no memory of the half-life of their human existence, never touching in the flesh. Only the anguish of a split second at sunrise and sunset when they can almost touch, but not.
Always together, eternally apart.
As long as the sun rises and sets, as long as there is day and night, and for as long as they both shall live. You have stumbled onto a tragic story, Philippe Gaston. And now, whether you like it or not, you are lost in it. with the rest of us.
So, Sarah, this was one of your early chapters of your book that you're working on. What jumps out to you as saying, this is what resonates, this is why I love this movie?
Well, what first attracted me to it, when I first saw it when I was younger, was that there's sort of a Beauty and the Beast aspect to it, which was my favorite fairy tale growing up. And so that was what drew me in. And, it's such a tragic love story, that, they're, like he says, they're always together and eternally apart. And, it's like they have to stay together, because if they don't, what else do they have? So that really spoke to me, just the level of that commitment, and it's not like they could talk to each other or, be like, look, I can't do this anymore, I'm leaving you, type thing. They couldn't even communicate with each other. It's just was sort of an unspoken thing. It's like, no, I've got to stay with him and I've got to stay with her, because if I don't, I have nothing else. And, that, and then just the it's just a beautifully shot movie. I love the whole medieval backdrop, and I love the character of Philippe and his relationship with God and the way that he just talks to him through the whole movie. And, I think that they did a really good job, with that, because that's not something that you see in a whole lot of movies, even Christian movies, like people just having that sort of casual, intimate, genuine friendship with God, where he's talking to him like you would talk to a friend. Like he asks him for help. He goes to him when he's afraid. He asks him frank questions like, God, why are you doing this? It's like, I don't want this. I don't get it. I don't understand what you're saying. He's very free to be honest with God about what he's feeling and when he doesn't understand something. But at the same time, he trusts that God's brought him into this, and so he's going to bring him out too. It's just a really beautiful thing. I love it.
Yeah, that probably my favorite line he has after he pickpockets while he's in the water. He says, I know I promised, Lord, never again, but I also know that you know what a weak-willed person I am.
I love that. That's terrific. Yeah, he's got some great lines.
Yeah, they definitely gave the best lines to the mouse there.
It's like, where's the woman? She flew away. What? God's truth, she flew away.
So, and you sort of touched on a couple of the directions we're going to go. So Britt, kind of pitching the question to you, what is it that you love about this movie when you look back now, almost 40 years?
It's getting close.
So going back, when we were adolescent boys watching this movie.
At its core, it's a romantic movie, but it's not a romantic movie in the classic sense of like, there's a meet cute, and then there's the development of stuff like they're already in love, and they're already kind of stuck in this tragic story, and it's kind of a magical thing. But it's a very, like Sarah was saying, it's a very simple setup that they allow Philippe to discover the setup. I mean, it's pretty obvious, and in any sort of description of the movie, will tell you the setup.
It's in the name.
It's in the name. As the movie progresses, you really get a sense of character, you get a sense of longing, and like a lot of these like universal really things. And when I was a kid, it was the humor of Matthew Broderick, along with the heroism of the Navarre character. But I was also a believer as a young kid, so I appreciated that they involved God in the story. God gives the monk, the priest, the fallen priest, a dream, and it gives him but it's not like it's not just like throwaway God's gonna fix everything moment either. Like this is what God's saying to do. Now we got to do that, as crazy as it looks, as much as we might we might think there's no way that can happen. How can there be a day without a night and a night without a day? And of course, as a kid, you're like, oh yeah, an eclipse. And, you just get all sort of like, that's awesome. And it's just all of those elements that were simple, but I think, as we'll get into maybe, there's a lot of powerful layers to it at the same time. And to me, that's good writing. It can be simple writing if the stakes mean something, if the stakes really mean something and the story and the characters are fleshed out enough that you care what happens to these people.
So it's interesting because you said that, and then it made me think, why do we care? Navarre is not a likable dude. And we don't really get to know Michelle Pfeiffer's character, Isabeau. But why do we care about them? We care about him because Mouse cares about him. Philippe Gaston. He revealed, we see their character through him. He gets, as the monk says, you've gotten pulled into this tragic story.
Well, there is a save the cat moment with Navarre in the beginning because he saves Philippe. And when he's fighting those other,
saves the mouse.
That's right, Paul.
When he's fighting those other soldiers, he makes a point not to kill them. Like he didn't mean to kill the one guy. Like someone else pushed him into doing it. And so yes, he's gruff and maybe not likable, but at the same time, you still get through his actions. He's a person of honor. He's capable. He's so capable. He can beat people without killing them. All of those sort of things that they don't say out loud, but they show don't tell. And the fact that he saves Philippe twice or 3 times. How many times did he save this guy?
Every time.
And even as a wolf, he saves Philippe, right? So he's heroic and he's honorable, and yet he's still misdirected. He still believes a lie and needs to come back to the truth of who he is and what can happen.
So here's what we're going to talk about for the rest of the time. We're almost half an hour in, and now we're going to frame up, because you've got these parallels, but they're not really parallels. The appearances, you've got the false religion as evidenced in the character of the bishop, and then contrasted that with Philippe's relationship with God, as you were mentioning, Sarah, his friendship, his relationship, his close personal walk with God. We've got that contrast, which I think sort of leads into the other big thing that we see in how, as Navarre and Isabeau long for intimacy but constantly fail. And we know that one of my friends said, he says, loneliness is when the expectation of our relationship is greater than the reality of the relationship. And that gap is loneliness. And we have that whether it's friends, whether it's work, whether it's with our spouses, with our partners. I can't say always, but there's almost always going to be a gap. Whether it's and there's a communication, there's expectation, there's just this gap. And try as we might, we fail to reach it, which also parallels the gospel. Try as hard as we can, we're not going to reach God. And so what actually brings us together is a supernatural event. Not to over spiritualize it, but that's sort of what we do.
One of the things I love about it is, again, these are universal ideas that draw us in and help. We've all been in the position to some degree where a religious mindset has abused us. We've all been there. That is something all of us can relate to. Even Jesus can relate to it. Even Jesus had to deal with people, even though he did nothing wrong. The Romans were not against him. I mean,
right.
Pilate was like, I don't care what happened.
I wash my hands. Take him back. You deal with him. He's done nothing wrong.
it was the very people who claimed and man, just read like Luke 12 or woe to the Pharisees. I mean, like Jesus gave these guys the hardest time because he was like, you guys are the ones who should know better. And yet you're greedy and you're this and you're that. And I'm telling you, it's what makes the Gospels attractive to us. We're like, yeah, there are people who have religious power and they pass by the guy who's lying dead on the road, and we know that this is the world that we live in, and so they give us that in the bishop who like there's this really weird moment where he's watching this girl dance, and I'm like, it's like I thought you're supposed to be celibate, man. Like, like it's just really it's icky, right?
Yeah.
But so they do a great job making him look but the devil loves religious activity without the presence of God. The devil loves that because that is the ultimate lie. That's the ultimate lie, that you can have a religious, good, moral life. That's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Like that you can have this without God, without an actual relationship with God. And yet what we see in these other two characters, as broken as they are, they have an actual relationship with God, and they redeem the design that's supposed to happen between the man and the woman. As broken as they are, because they actually have a relationship with God, they are able to redeem this. And so I love that contrast in this movie because it's been my experience. I was telling the church yesterday. Yeah, right. Today's Monday. I was telling the church yesterday, I was like, man, anybody who tells you that you're not supposed to hear the voice of God, if there's anybody who tells you, and especially if they're a pastor or a Christian or a minister, run. Like, I don't know who I would be without hearing the voice of God. I don't know. I don't know, but I wouldn't be this. And I
would not be on this podcast without hearing the voice of God. That's
like,
for sure.
And my sheep know me. My sheep hear my voice. Like this is like the Bible wouldn't exist without somebody being able to hear God's voice. Like this, like this, just like this. That's what gives it authority, is because people heard from God and didn't speak from their own authority. They didn't figure it out. God told them, gave them revelation. And this is core to the new, like we really think that God sent his son to earth to be among us, Emmanuel, to not talk to us. Like, we really think that's like, really? Like the veil was torn, and like all this enmity between us and God was broken down. So we won't talk. I mean, I just don't get it. How anyone would, but people do say this, like, no, you really can't hear it. Just read the Bible. You can't hear the voice of God. But so I love that contrast here, where as broken as they are, they communicate with God. I love it.
Yeah. You contrast that with,
yeah, that's great.
And even, dude, there's some like old hymns, worship songs, whatever, that's all like these and thous, and it just it's cringy to me. I understand there's people who find that extremely worshipful and respectful, and that brings them into the presence of God. And for me, it feels like that religious voice that's keeping me away, or like you just said, almost like a religious pride of look how good we are. Now, Sarah, because you've got the t-shirt on.
Yes, I do.
You've read the novelization. This is something you brought out in your notes as well, that contrast again between the bishop, the religion of the bishop, and the religion of Philippe.
Yeah, because I mean, the bishop is supposed to be a man of God, and obviously is like the furthest thing from a true man of God ever, because, I mean, he's got a mistress. He like taxes the populace to death just so that he can keep himself in, silks and jewels. He's lusting after Isabeau, he has zero mercy or empathy for anybody. And then he makes a deal with the devil to curse the couple, because if he can't have her, no man will, and one of the, like, this is why I just love reading movie novelizations, because it's like you find out so many things about the characters that you don't watching the movie. I mean, part of the deal that the bishop made with the devil was to protect his own soul. So his soul, apparently, according to the terms of the curse, he will never like go to hell as long as the curse remains on the couple unbroken. So that's part of the reason why he goes to such extremes to make sure that they stay cursed, because as long as they stay cursed, he's safe from hell and stuff. And the movie actually ends when, Navarre, kills him, and then he actually turns into a wolf, like this like old scraggy wolf, and kind of runs away and stuff like that. But so throughout the course of the book, he just feels free to carry out all of these unspeakable crimes and do these terrible things, because he's like, hey, I'm not going to catch anything for this. I can do whatever the heck I want. It's like, so and then Navarre, the character of Navarre, meanwhile, his family has served the church for 5 generations, and his whole legacy and history is bound up in serving God and serving the church, and loyalty and fealty. And so then when he's called to serve under this really unholy bishop and has to do, acts of cruelty to people in the bishop's name, he does it because in his eyes, the bishop is speaking for God and he's trying to stay faithful and stuff. And the only reason he rebels against that is because he falls in love with Isabeau, and the bishop tries to take her away from him and stuff. And so then when they both get cursed, he loses his faith in God and just becomes consumed with revenge, and stuff. And it takes the curse being broken to bring his faith back. And, part of that is Philippe. And it's funny, you were saying, Britt, like you were, you were a Christian when you first saw this movie growing up. I was not, because I was brought up in the Roman Catholic Church. And I'm not saying that Roman Catholics aren't Christian, because I've known many that, are wonderful Jesus lovers.
We don't. Yeah. Speaking of works of the enemy, division is the primary one, I think.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah, right.
But my personal, religion at that point was just, my parents making us go to church on Sunday. I actually went to a Catholic private school for a while, and, it was just a lot of rote, to me. It was just, like, and when this movie takes place, this was obviously like before the Reformation and Martin Luther and stuff. So at that point, a lot of these peasants who were going to church didn't even understand what was happening, because all the masses were in Latin, and these peasants didn't speak Latin, so they were just, up there like speaking gibberish, basically, which they were forced to go to because it was the law. So you, like, how miserable is that, and so then you've got Philippe. And this was like, I think, another thing that fascinated me, because I'm like, 10 years old watching this, and there's this guy in the movie having this extremely casual friendship with God, which I had no inkling of at that time. So that was kind of strange and odd to see portrayed that way. But in the book, you find out Philippe was born in a prison because his mother was hanged for stealing bread. So as soon as she had him, they took her off and killed her. And then he was raised in a monastery for the first, 10 years of his life or so, where, he was taught how to read and write and, learned about God and stuff. But he ran away because they would beat him, as a discipline. And yet he still was able to develop this really terrific, intimate friendship with God, where there's times in the movie where he's like, oh, Lord, don't let that thing be coming at me be what I think it is, but he's still able to be like, but he's still able to say, no hard feelings, of course, but, I'll be really disappointed,
Right. Yeah.
So he still is like showing respect to God, being like, hey, your will, whatever, I'm just going to be really sad. And he's able to ask him honest questions like, Lord, I told the truth. How can I learn any moral lessons if you keep confusing me? And stuff. And, he's just very open and frank with God, like, I don't know what this story is. I beg you not to make me a part of it, and stuff. But I mean, he also trusts God, and trusts that he's going to take care of them. And that gives Philippe the freedom to be very honest in his relationship with God, not just with his questions, but about who he is as a person, because he's able to say to God, yes, I'm a thief. I'm a liar. You know this, like you were saying earlier, Paul, like, what a weak-willed person I am. And stuff. And he's not afraid. He doesn't try to hide from God. And I think that makes him a bit more open when Imperius, reveals to him that he's found a way to break the curse. And so I feel like God really used Philippe as a go-between, between Navarre and Imperius, because Navarre wouldn't have listened to Imperius just on his own, because Imperius betrayed them, and he was very angry, rightly so, at him. But he took Philippe and, his belief and his faith and his loyalty, not just to God, but to Navarre and Isabeau, to be like, no, let's give him a chance. Let's see, what have you got to lose? It might work, and stuff. And so he brought him in at literally just the right time, like right before the eclipse happened, and, was able to really use him in a variety of ways, spiritual, physical, emotional, to be a bridge and stuff. And I love it when God sends us people in our lives to be that bridge, and show us God in a way that we haven't seen before and stuff. Because I know that he did that for me, and it just, it radically changed my life. It was just incredible.
There's this distance and tragic distance between two people who love each other, right? Navarre and Isabeau. And part of the redemption is someone, like you said, being the bridge. Like, they can't communicate with each other, and yet it shows the power of community. That shows the power of how community can say, no, she actually really loves you. You know that, right? You guys keep missing each other. You guys keep talking beyond each other. And if that's all it was, then if that's all you have, then you're isolated and you're alone from each other. But when you have a community or people, or when there are people in your life who can go, well, he actually really loves you. Like, he would do anything for you. And Philippe kind of just makes it up, but he's not really making it up. Like, the heart of what he's saying is true.
Yeah.
Even though he's like, he makes it poetic, and he's like, oh, he said, he gives us her, blah, 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 which makes it fun and funny. But at the same time, like, that's why one of the reasons we need community in a good way is because that's part of the reconciliation, is that we're meant to have community. And that's what they have at the end, that once the man and the woman kind of see each other as they are and break the curse, like, you see this stoic guy very affectionate toward Philippe and very affectionate toward Imperius, and like so he's gone from revenge to very affectionate, and that's being a full man. Being a full man is a guy who can fight with a sword, but is also very tender at the same time, and can be very gentle and tender. And so you finally see that in him, instead of the wolf, right? Like, this is this archetype of who he is, and we can't communicate because I'm a wolf, You're
seeing the man that Isabeau fell in love with in the first place.
Exactly. And so, but again, like you said, Philippe is that kind of intermediary between them, where he's able to translate, you can't see each other for who you really are because of the curse. And that was the curse. That's part of the curse of the garden. The curse after the garden was enmity between man and wife. They were meant to work together and complement one another and be partners in mission, be fruitful and multiply and all that fun stuff, out of intimacy. But part of the curse is, I'm going to put this thing between you. in your husband. I'm going to put this thing between you and the land. I'm going to put this thing. Now there's this distance now between you and God. You got to cover yourself. Like there's distance and separation instead of wholeness and unity. And that's what makes what Christ did on the cross, and the splitting of the veil between the Holy of Holies and the, it's all open now. It's for anybody who would come. And it's not, and that's why that's real relationship. And I just think that that's a universal thing about this movie is, I think, as much as we desire relationship and connection and intimacy, our movies, our songs, the pop songs, everything is like centered around this, like, I'm going to love you forever. Right. But we fail so often at that. And it's because, there's this disconnect that where we don't want to be vulnerable, or we believe lies about each other. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Breakup, and it's not a great movie, but it had Vince Vaughn and Jennifer Aniston in it. And there's a scene in the beginning where they have this huge fight. And as tragic as the scene is, it's one of the best written scenes ever, because they're both talking, but they're not saying what they really mean. They're not being vulnerable with each other about how they really feel, and putting themselves out there. They're miscommunicating. Everything they say is misheard and miscommunicated, and then that leads to the tragedy of the movie about the breakup. And so I think we can all relate to that, wanting that intimacy, but feeling like, well, when I'm ready, he's a wolf, right? When I'm ready to talk, he's a wolf. Or when I'm ready to talk, she flies away. I think we can relate to that, those sort of ideas. But then in the light, like you said, Paul, like in a supernatural way in Christ, we have the security of God's love in order to be real with each other and find that intimacy and return back to that purpose-driven relationship and intimacy that we can have. And that's not just men and women, like you said, like it can be other sort of relationships too. But yeah, I love it.
I was really feeling for Isabeau, just like picturing what her life must have been like, because I mean, at least Navarre's a man during the day, so he's able to go around and like talk to people that he meets and stuff. And it's right. Like, it's pretty normal for him to have, like a hawk and stuff. That was a normal thing at that point. She's a woman all by herself at night, always at night, so you don't know what kind of bad guys are like out there in the dark. It's not safe for her to go around very many people because she's a woman with no protector, in medieval times, like Carla Hoke likes to say, what would kill you in medieval times?
She's a hawk, so she doesn't even have clothes.
Yeah. And it's like, like what Carla Hoke says about medieval times. Hey, what would kill you in medieval times? Everything. So she has no protector. She's a woman by herself, always at night. And she's got a big scary wolf, dogging her the whole time. But that also ensures that she can never be around civilized people because she's got a big scary wolf, hanging around with her. So she is constantly alone, like totally by herself, and like she's in the most committed relationship ever. And she has nothing to show for it but utter and complete loneliness, which is why when Philippe finally shows up, it's like a massive relief and breath of fresh air. Like, oh, you're his friend. You travel with him. Finally, somebody to talk to. Please tell me about him. What has he said? Where are we going? What are we doing? It's just like, what does he say about me? It's like,
and he does the same thing. What does she say? Did you talk to her? What did she say? And I think a lot of people can relate to this reality that you can be married and live in the same house and feel utterly and completely alone.
Yeah.
In fact, maybe more alone than you did when you were single.
Yeah.
Because you are in the presence of something that should give you comfort and yet doesn't. It should give you intimacy, and yet that's not what's happening. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, or maybe they've been in that situation, or, you can live in a house and still feel completely alone. And, there's this myth that, going back to the whole Philippe thing, there's this myth that the divorce rate in the church is the same as in outside the people who don't go to church. It's a myth. It's a lie. It's not true. The data shows that married couples who regularly attend a church have much lower, that the divorce rate among those couples are much lower. It's not that they never get divorced, but it's much higher among couples who don't go to church. Like, literally being in a faith community can do this, can be like, whoa, wait a minute. You really think she believes that about you? Being at where now, again, that doesn't mean it's not like a foolproof plan. Like, if I go to church, I'll never get divorced. But that's not what the data shows. But it's something that the world has tried to say.
Yeah.
That's like, non-Christians put this out there. Well, see, it doesn't matter if you go to church. It's, Christians are just as bad as everybody else, blah, 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 blah. They get divorced just as the same rate. It's not true. And pastors for years would repeat this. And maybe some still do. And because they heard it somewhere. But the data just doesn't show that if you're in a community where you can be vulnerable enough and let people into your life, that it can help you save a marriage,
Yeah.
or get through those tough times when you would normally have punted or hit the eject button.
I was just going to say, like, actually going back to the Romancing the Stone podcast, we touched a little bit on, that loneliness, and seeking that in a person in that as well. And, I encourage people to go back and listen to that, because I talk about, being a single person, like, I've never been in a relationship, I've never had a boyfriend. I've been single my entire life, and I'm 48 years old, and so it took me a long time to come to that place to realize that I could be happy and not have to be in a relationship to be happy, that I could, like, find that satisfaction in God, and stuff, and in the community that he's put me in, because, it's like, I have a family here. I have people who care about me, and stuff like that I can, I can reach out to, and that reach out to me when I need it, and stuff. So yeah, definitely.
So I keep seeing this idea of that gap, that what is loneliness. As you were saying, Britt, you were talking about even in a marriage, you could be lonely because what you expect, what from that relationship, from your wife, from your husband, what you expect falls short of what it is. I thought it'd be like this, but it's not. And in that gap, you have loneliness. I thought we'd have this level of intimacy. And I don't mean physical, but I mean like personal, relational intimacy. And it's not. What am I going to do with that? It could be with friends. Hey, I thought I'd have this sort of friendship. And, not to use the other one, he's just not that into you. It's like, oh, I really want to be friends with this person. They're not sending me that same signal, and it's kind of a bummer. And even with God, I thought walking with God would be like this. And it's not. I thought reading through Acts, and we all know the story of Paul. He's heading to Damascus, gets knocked off his horse, talks to Jesus, and has a radical conversion story. And immediately his life is in danger. I was like, I'm not sure I was talking to God, because I think if it was talking to God, I wouldn't be running for my life, sort of thing. So he leaves Damascus, goes to Jerusalem, where a whole different group of people want to kill him. Like walking with God, where people want to kill you every day.
That's not the best ad campaign.
No, it's terrible. And it's right there in Acts. It's like their star pupil, right? So Paul's in Damascus. He can't see God, as we were talking about with Philippe. God talks to Ananias. In Acts 9, it says, there's a believer in Damascus named Ananias. And the Lord spoke to him in a vision saying, Ananias. It's a good start. God knows my name. Yes, Lord, he replied. The Lord said, go over to Straight Street to the house of Judas. When you get there, ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul. He's praying to me right now. I have shown him a vision of a man named Ananias coming in and laying hands on him so he can see again. And Ananias' response sounds just like Philippe's would. But Lord, exclaimed Ananias, I've heard many people talk about the terrible things this man has done to believers in Jerusalem. And he's authorized by the priest to arrest everyone who calls on his name, on your name. Like very Philippe-ish as he's responding. This doesn't seem like a great idea, God.
Yeah, I kind of disagree.
But the Lord said, go, for Saul is my chosen instrument to take my message to the Gentiles and to kings as well as to the people of Israel. And I will show him how much he must suffer for my name's sake. That's not a verse that gets preached on a lot.
No. Again, not a great ad campaign. Join me
and suffer.
But Jesus said the same thing. They hated me first. They're going to hate you.
Yeah.
So come on and follow me. But there's a promise with that. The promise with, in this world you will have trouble. And I've told you this beforehand, so when it happened, it wouldn't surprise you. That like I'm going to tell you that this is going to suck at times, because if I told you it was all going to be unicorns and poop and rainbows, that if I told you,
are the unicorns pooping rainbows, or am I pooping rainbows?
Yes.
I was going to say
either one,
but it sounded like unicorns
either
poop
one.
and rainbows.
That if that's all it was, if that's what you thought, if that's what you thought this was going to be, and then there's hard times, that's it. You eject. You're out. But if I tell you ahead of time, there's going to be times that this is going to suck. But don't worry, because I've overcome the world. I've overcome not just the problems in the world, but the world the problems are in. Like, I've overcome the whole thing. So yes, you're going to go through hard times. Yes, you're going to go through this stuff. And yes, there are going to be a lot of things that aren't fun, but don't worry, I'm going to be with you. And in the end, you're going to overcome all of it. There's victory, but you got to stick. You got to stick. It's he who endures to the end will be saved. Like, you got to stick with this and not give up. And so here's something that I tell married people or people who are getting married, because I do some premarital counseling every now and then. And I think this relates to the movie, the end of the movie, because a lot of times what happens is when we start to have conflict in a marriage, or really you could say with friends, close friends, or in any sort of close relationship, you have to stop and say, you're not my enemy. You have to stop and tell yourself the truth and tell each other the truth. I love you and you're not the enemy. So what we have to do is realize there's an enemy outside of us that's trying to get us to divide. So now how are we going to fight together against him? How are we going to fight together against this enemy that's trying to divide us? And that's what they do at the end of the movie. They stand together. Look at me. We're here against you. And that breaks that curse. And what happens so often is we treat each other like the enemy. Because we're not perfect and we do make mistakes. Okay. And so we have to forgive and we have to ask for forgiveness and all that sort of stuff like that has to happen. But there has to be a moment where, because in the middle of it, you're trying to fight. and you're trying to get yours, and you're trying to like make sure you survive, and you're the wolf. Or
I got to make sure this doesn't happen again, or that she respects me, or
literally the wolf and the hawk are fight or flight. literally, we've got fight or flight, right? But instead be still and know that I am God. Just stop and tell each other the truth. I love you. I'm for you. And how can we together face this problem as one? How can we do this together? And then what happens is you break the lie. You break the lie. And the enemy's now powerless against you because you've broken the lie. And that's what happens at the end of the movie.
You kind of just really nicely encapsulated like Imperius and Navarre's whole conflict there too.
Well, yes.
You know, it's like he was a trusted confidant of both him and Isabeau, and he betrayed them, unfortunately. He asks for forgiveness. You know,
yes.
And Navarre has to like come to the point where he realizes that Imperius isn't his enemy and that he's legit trying to help them. You know, and when he finally does come to that point and trusts him, you know, he is, like you said, able to stand with Isabeau and break the curse.
And he had to see how he hurt Philippe in the middle of the night.
Right. Yeah,
when Philippe was Philippe was trying to save him, and he was like, how did you get hurt? Was that me? Like sometimes we don't get when we hurt people.
Yeah.
Right? We don't get it until we see it. And it's like, oh, and then you see Navarre's heart soften towards him. Like, okay, now I'm willing to listen.
That's a beautiful scene.
You know, but again, it's all archetypes but it's so universal that we want that community. We want to have a community of people that we know we can trust and are going to be for us no matter what. And that's what we have again, right, Paul? We keep showing it, right? At the end of the movie, that's what we have. We have a community. We have family.
All these people at the church just watching Navarre kill left and right with not moving or doing anything.
That's the weirdest part of the movie to me.
Exceedingly
like
weird,
no police coming in for these deaths. No, nothing. Just we're gonna watch them and they're just gonna dance around. I love you.
Well, this is about this. Are you kidding? That was probably the most exciting thing that ever happened during a mass, like ever.
Right?
True story.
Ooh, a show.
This is different.
This is some good incense, baby. Although I want to go back to Ananias for a second, because as you were talking, Britt, I started chuckling because I just wanted to say this because I feel like he's sort of like Miracle Max. God's like, he's like, yeah, he said true. He said to bluff. He said to blave. He's like, no, I'm going to show him how much he's going to suffer. Oh, he's going to suffer? Sufferings galore. I'm on the case. He's like, I'm going to show him how much he suffered. And Ananias went.
I'm not a bitch, I'm your wife.
That's awesome.
Britt and Sarah, thank you guys for coming on and talking on Ladyhawke, coordinating, getting together. You're both here, both present. No one's a fighter, a flight, hawk, or a wolf. We're all good. So this has been Paul McDonald, Sarah Daniels, and Britt Mooney talking about Ladyhawke. Check it out. It won a couple Academy Awards, so it's not all bad. Hopefully.
Alan Parsons score. I'm sorry.
Can we have a petition where they remix that movie with actual orchestration?
Can we please? I mean, Richard Donner's dead. He doesn't care anymore.
Can we like do a GoFundMe and pay Hans Zimmer or somebody to go in there and like score this thing?
There's got to be a fan edit out there somewhere that can make this happen.
It wouldn't be too hard.
It would go on a whole other level. I'm telling you.
Mm-hmm. Agree, 100%.
All right. So we hope you enjoyed it. I mean, I got nothing to add. And I hope you join us next time here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?